Hey guys, first regardsman here. I'm probably talking about the new Focus Entertainment poll they put out today for Space Marine 2, talking about a contested health recovery rework they've been talking about, or at least thinking about. Now, CHP has been a big issue in this game for a while. There is a huge discrepancy in how much CHP you get back from ranged weapons versus melee weapons, and it looks like they're trying to change this or putting out a poll for it. So I'm going to read over all this giant statement they have here, and I'll give you my thoughts. So first up, they say, today we'd like to hear your thoughts on the balance of contested health recovery. Since the game's release, a misconfiguration in contested health recovery values has meant that ranged weapons restore far too much contested health, while melee weapons restore far too little. Nearly a year has passed since launch, and by now, everyone is used to playing this incorrect setup where ranged weapons recover much more health than melee weapons. To be honest, it's been bothering me since day one. I'm looking at you, Plasma Pistol. Now that we've addressed some of the bigger and easier PvE balance issues, we'd like to tackle this lingering one. We could have adjusted the values at any point over the past year without asking, but I worry that you've become so accustomed to the current state that even a small positive change could cause a strong negative reaction. After all, the game is perfectly playable and fun as it is, but we believe there is still room for improvement. Kind of a weird flex. They could have just said they could have just done this at any time. So like, how charitable of them to just ask you. But I don't know, kind of a weird thing to put in this, if I'm being honest. But next they say, any adjustment to contested health recovery will significantly affect the game's balance. Ranged combat will become more challenging, while melee combat will become easier, more forgiving, and more brawl heavy. This will shake up the entire meta across weapons, perks, and classes. Contested health is a core mechanic that helps mitigate player mistakes, and more importantly, reduces the number of finishers needed to stay alive, making players invulnerable during finisher animations, unlike in the original Space Marine. I love Space Marine 1, one of my favorite games of all times, but being killed mid-finisher was frustrating, and the number of finishers required for survival could feel repetitive, with invulnerability during finishers dying being nearly impossible, given how frequently they're performed, so it makes sense that finishers are absent from Space Marine 1's Exterminatus mode. They also say being able to recover quickly by executing an enemy and regaining most of your lost HP keeps you in the fight instead of retreating to wait for armor to regenerate, which can break the game's power fantasy. We'll talk about some other things that will break the game's power fantasy in this game in a second, but first, I'm going to get through this here. They say the difficulty with contested health recovery is that it's a complex system influenced by many factors: damage dealt, the current melee attack, chosen difficulty, AoE, number of targets hit, and more. Even a small tweak risks breaking something unintentionally. It may require hotfixes. I mean, knowing Saber, it's almost guaranteed to break something unintentionally, but I mean, hotfixes are probably gonna happen no matter what. Hopefully a PTS will be able to alleviate this. It probably won't, but I must warn anyone that it might introduce some new issues. We also can't simply buff melee contested health recovery, as that would make the game too easy, and absolute difficulty is already not particularly punishing, so any melee buff would have to be paired with a reasonable nerf to range contested health recovery. So here's the question: do you want us to adjust contested health recovery globally, reducing it for ranged weapons but increasing it for melee weapons? Please note, changes to this mechanic will require extensive internal testing, and it will take some time. Even with positive results, these adjustments will not appear in patch 10. Thank you for the support as always, Dmitry Grigorenko, game director. I'm just gonna call him Dmitry. Dmitry. Okay, that's his name. All right. So point is, they're asking us if we want to change the contested health recovery to primarily focus on melee weapons, and ranged weapons will be nerfed. Well, first up, ranged weapons being nerfed for CHP recovery will dramatically affect the heavy class. Maybe not too much, but we'll see how far they would actually go with this. But my biggest issue here would be, the thing that actually kills you in Space Marine 2 is usually like a stagger stun nuke from like a boss or something, because when they talk about absolute being not particularly punishing right now, that is true. In a group of 3 players, you can positively cruise through absolute difficulty, but I don't think that's because of the CHP recovery system. I think that's because of the damage output of the players as like a 3-man, and the game simply doesn't send enough at you in absolute right now for like 3 people know what they're doing to like really get punished that hard, and the boss spawns are by far the hardest part of this game. And we've already really seen that, like, even in the siege mode, the part that like really kills people are triple boss spawns, and the reason for that is that getting chain stunned, frame trapped is actually the most dangerous thing in the entire game, and having an increased CHP recovery on melee weapons will probably not help that part at all, because that is the most punishing part of the game. Like, the CHP recovery of ranged weapons is super lame, but it's not like a super big problem in my opinion as far as like your survivability ability goes, it's just an irritating thing to play around with. And they talk about buffing melee CHP being too strong. You know, when we look at a class like Vanguard, the Chainsword, that already has really strong CHP, he by no means feels OP in melee CHP on top of having a ranged weapon for CHP recovery. I don't know if I necessarily agree with this. It depends on how far they would go, but like some weapons definitely need CHP recovery more than others, and not even all of the ranged weapons are like particularly OP in like their CHP recovery. Like Bolt Carbine is pretty damn strong for CHP. Stalker Bolt Rifle, Plasma even, though I probably put things like the Bolt Carbine over it in CHP recovery because it's far more consistent. But as far as melee weapons go, the Chainsword is pretty strong already on the Vanguard, especially because he has that 50% buff. And other weapons like the Thunder Hammer really do need a CHP buff regardless of like whether they globally change or not, because you need to have a proper reward for like your CHP back on slow weapons. So that's why the Power Fist is so strong right now, because the Power Fist one-shots Majoris and gets you an Execute, which like basically functions as a 100% CHP recovery. And another issue with the CHP is less so like the actual recovery is not enough, it's that you lose it way too fast. So like things like advanced conditioning and defense mechanism made the biggest change for the assault class, because the assault class's issue was that he couldn't get in to do his damage. Now my biggest worry would be that the things for, so they talked here about breaking the power fantasy. My biggest worry is that things like the Sword Warrior and Rage guys, those guys are overtuned already. A lot of the enraged enemies in this game are very overtuned, and if you were to attempt to melee an enraged devourer, even if they buff the CHP recovery, I don't know how far they would go on like the melee CHP recovery, but I can't imagine like for every class it's going to be significantly better than like the Vanguard's recovery right now. Maybe it will be, but the biggest issue in this game as far as like breaking the power fantasy right now is an enraged Sword Warrior will go up on you. He will start blocking with his sword. He will stop 100% of your CHP recovery from both melee and range, and you'll just watch your HP bar drain, and then you just wait for like 5 minutes for him to open up and actually attack you, because there's pretty much no way to stagger an enraged Sword Warrior in this game and like on absolute difficulty unless he actually decides to open up for you, or you have like 2 block charges or like a ground pound, but even then he'll reduce like the ground pound damage to 0. So I feel like the issue in the game right now is less so that like melee CHP recovery is like flat out terrible, which it is for a lot of the weapons, but it's also just like there's no real counterplay to ranged combat, period. Like ranged combat becoming harder will make bad interactions that already exist feel worse. You know, I do agree that they don't want to make the game too easy, but I don't think like their idea of buffing melee contested health recovery will actually make the game too easy, because I don't really think ranged weapons restoring the CHP they have now is OP by any means. Like maybe the rate of fire plasma pistols a little overtuned right now with like advanced conditioning, but like besides that, I don't think there's a lot that's like super busted, and also costs you ammo, so like there's a secondary level on top of that. And if they were to buff both of them, like that's what most people have been asking for, I don't think that would be OP. Now let's see what people actually have to say down here. Now Sergeant Rorschach says, I generally would have voted for range health recovery to stay unchanged in addition to melee recovery increasing, but seeing as how you explicitly said you won't, I voted for range to be decreased. To elaborate, I think range health recovery for the most part feels good as it is, as it's one of the few things that makes the range playstyle viable. That said, I would not be opposed to specific weapons with high burst damage like the plasma pistol being nerfed, while other weapons like every bolt weapon stay unchanged, in addition to melee health recovery buffs. See, I kind of agree with this, because the big issue here is that things like the auto bolt rifle, heavy bolt rifle, and a lot of the bolt rifles already aren't very good for CHP recovery compared to like super heavy hitting single shot weapons like DMRs with the stalker bolt rifle and the plasma rifle and like heavy plasma. And I feel like those guns, they should give you a pretty high amount of CHP recovery, maybe not like full HP, but even then, if they nerf the CHP recovery of a plasma pistol, when you're at low HP, you already have damage reduction, so getting CHP back wouldn't be too hard. Now this guy says, contested health gain should probably increase for both melee and range, as I experienced times where gun strikes don't give me contested health back. This is a great point from Jigsaw1591 here, because another thing I want to talk about is that the way you get your CHP back in melee, because of the fundamental combat loop in Space Marine 2, is that you're usually going to be gun striking somebody. Like gun strikes are a fat, giant way to get CHP back, completely independent of the actual melee attacks in this game. And usually when you are hit by a melee attack in close range and you lose your HP, you're going to perfect dodge, or most people use like a fencing or balanced weapon, you're going to parry them again on like the next attack in their string, and then shoot them for your gun strike health recovery. So like in cases like that, a increase to the CHP recovery of melee is going to be basically doing nothing for you, and ranged weapons will just be like severely nerfed, and you're going to be really struggling versus things like a Carnifex. Because for example, I'm trying to make give a good example here, because I've been in this situation a lot where like you're playing by yourself or whatever it may be with people, and you get like knocked over by a Karn effects. There are some animations that are so long while you are staggered in Space Marine 2 that you literally cannot get back up in time to actually get CHP back with a melee weapon, and you'd have to shoot them. And if the CHP recovery from ranged weapons is gone, losing your HP in that way feels really, really bad. It already feels pretty bad on automatic weapons to lose like half your HP from one hit, that like you're just sitting there watching your character get back up. And chain staggers are already the worst issue in this game, period. And I really don't feel like nerfing range recovery on CHP and just only buffing melee weapons is going to fix that, because most melee recovery comes from gun strikes already, at least versus Extremis and Majoris, especially versus Tyranids, and probably Chaos once they add the Chaos spawn. So, you know, I'm thinking two ways about this. It really depends on how far they actually go with the CHP recovery of melee weapons, because, you know, if they go further than Vanguard, it could be very strong, but if they reduce the ranged weapons too much, they're going to feel really, really bad, especially if you're fighting things like a Zoanthrope where you have no melee option to shoot back at them. Because say like right now, if you're an assault and you get knocked over by the Zoanthrope and he takes your HP and you shoot back at him, you can get your HP back. But if you have like this decrease in the range damage, you don't really have a melee option to actually hit them again. So like ranged combat's going to feel horrendous, and ranged combat in this game already feels horrendous. So let me know what you guys think in the comments below on this, because I feel like a lot of people are have some mixed feelings on this, because most people do want CHP recovery on melee, and I'm in that group as well, but at the cost of all range CHP recovery being nerfed. I don't think this is like the massive like balance fuck up that they think it might be, because we already see with things like Vanguard that like unless you make the CHP recovery so high that you can sit in an enraged enemy's face with like no damage reduction, I don't think it's going to be busted personally. I guess you'd have to see what it does, but you know, if you play even some of the like Astartes overhaul and things like that, like the ranged combat, the melee CHP regen is like super amped in that, and it can be a little OP at times, but that's because it's like further over the Vanguard, so it depends on what they would actually do here. Anyways, like though as far as like their notes on balance and saying things like we could have changed at any point over the past year without asking, this is a really weird thing to say, in my opinion, to say like, oh, we didn't even need your permission but we're doing it anyways. How charitable of us. Like a really weird flex, to be honest. But I don't really trust Saber on their balance decisions in most cases. As far as this poll goes, I would probably rather it stay as it is, because not all the melee weapons are horrific for CHP recovery. And I imagine that if they did fuck up the range CHP, they're probably going to have it fucked up like they said here. Like they're already preparing you for like a colossal failure, which is that like they need a PTS and they risk like breaking things, and they'll need hot fixes over and over and over for CHP recovery. So that's already kind of alarming. So I mean, I guess for this vote, if it was me, I'd probably say no for now. I guess that's just me. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below, because I don't think the system is horrific right now, but like what they're implementing here or suggesting implementing sounds like they might break something, and considering it's Saber, they probably will break something. So let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Again, as always, thanks for watching. I know we're a little rambling in this because this is, you know, unscripted recording here, but I'm sure this will be like one of the hottest topics in the community for a while, and I'll probably make another video on this the more I think about it. These are my first reactions, is that CHP recovery on melee weapons needs to remove the damage cap, because that's why you get things like the Aftershock improved, not actually giving you back any CHP period, because there's actually a CHP cap on melee weapons to begin with. If they just took that off, I feel like the whole game would just feel better, and also Siege mode especially would feel better. So let me know what you guys think in the comments once again, and as always, thank you for watching. If you like content like this, subscribe for more, and take it easy.